It is the summer of 1964. Tensions are really high, and the civil rights movement is at a turning point. Though not all, many problems happen to be in Mississippi. See, most of the violence against African Americans in Mississippi was, instead of from the citizens, from the KKK. The Ku Klux Klan felt that the Citizens Council was not doing enough to stop integration, and they took matters into their own hands. Actions such as lynching and the general terrorization of black became very prominent in Mississippi. When the summer of 1964 came rolling around, civil rights groups such as Congress on Racial Equality, CORE, or Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, thought that enough was enough. They attempted to organize a voter registration drive to increase the amount of voters, African American voters, in Mississippi. The KKK teamed up with the police and state plus local authorities to carry out violent attacks against these activists. Arson, beatings, false arrest, and the murder were committed for the sole reason to stop activists. On June 15, 1964, the action started. 300 people to help with the movement arrived in Mississippi. The next day after their arrival, however, 3 of these people went missing. 6 weeks later, their bodies were found. The lack of protection the activists had federally was horrible. The federal government basically made no attempt to protect them. See, this created a sense of fear with the rest of the activists, and led them to essentially setting up places to finish their work for them in Mississippi, and then leaving Mississippi. The public outrage, however, was more strengthened than usual. People felt that the retaliation would be different if the victims were all black. So, this event ultimately weakened the link between non-violent civil rights activists and violent ones, because the non-violent ones, points were proven less, and the violent ones moved away from them more. And near the end of the whole thing, only about 1,200 Afro-Americans were registered to vote. So it was ultimately a failure when you look at the bigger scale of things. So, now that we essentially know what the Michigan Freedom Summer is, we have to look at to what extent the Michigan Freedom Summer brought the quest for equal rights for African Americans to a satisfactory standpoint. And to truly understand what standpoint it brought it to, we have to understand the area around where Mississippi was. So, think about this. Summer 1964. See, this is kind of towards the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, when everybody was hopeful and upjoy about it. But this is also the South. We have to remember, the standpoint for which it starts in the South is much lower than for the standpoint in which equality starts in the North, because the Civil War, all this action went down, and the South lost, so now they're bitter and extremely racist towards African Americans, much more racist than such in the North. So, to a greater extent, the Michigan Freedom Summer was not satisfactory in bringing African American rights to a satisfactory standpoint in Mississippi. This is because the death of the 2 white, 1 black people made fear in the towns of Mississippi. And fear was what, in the first place, was keeping the African Americans from voting. I mean, they were allowed to vote, but the fear of lynching or arson or anything else that the KKK would do to them stopped them from going to actually vote. To a lesser extent, it was satisfactory, however, because of, again, the death. This made other people realize and allowed more white people to join the cause, because they realized that the KKK weren't just gunning for African Americans. Since the 2 white people had died, 2 out of the 3 of the people who were killed by this event, they showed that the KKK were also gunning for people who believed in equality. And this belief in equality just mushed everybody in together except for the people who oppressed African Americans. So, now we get to analyze this first-hand source, this primary source of the whole thing going on. See, this is a wanted missing poster for the 3 missing men who were killed in the Mississippi Freedom Summer. So, as you can see, the origin of this it was signed by J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, who was a racist man, as we can tell, and it was sent out June 29th, 1964. See, they were decided to be missing in June 21st, 1964, even though the people said they've been missing since June 16th, 1964. Now, I think the purpose of this document was so the FBI could put it out there that they had attempted to search for them, when really I do not believe they did, because remember, J. Edgar Hoover was a very racist man. And the values of this document is that it provides us very keen information on what the man is, and it also provides us how African Americans were treated differently than white Americans. When it says teeth, both white columns are missing, but in the African American column, it says good, none missing. The first limitation of this document is the bias of who wrote it. John Edgar Hoover was a very racist man, and this leaves us that he might believe that the less details he puts in, the less chance they'll be found. Maybe he knows where they are. All of these things can be pointed to the fact that he's a very racist man, and he's biased and he will leave out details. The source is also limited because of the date that it puts they had gone missing. It puts that they'd been missing since June 21st, 1964, when really they had been missing since June 16th, 1964. This shows that the people who wrote it and the people who created the document didn't really care for the minor details. Thank you for watching. Ray Productions!